With hatred, all things are possible. Hello everyone, and welcome to the first of my Skyrim/Warhammer crossover challenge builds. If anyone has a better name to call it, please let me know, that'd be really helpful. If you saw this video, then you'll already know what's going on. If you didn't watch that video, then please do. You'll get a full idea of what this challenge series is all about, and Lord knows what I could do with the extra views. Because I know there will be a fair few people who won't watch the video no matter what I say, I'll also give the footnotes here. I'm making character builds in Skyrim based off of the playable characters in Total War Warhammer 2. In this video, I'll be going over the first of those, the Dark Elf Malus Darkblade, and explaining how each part of the build relates back to the character within the Warhammer game. Hopefully that's enough to get everyone on the same page. Let's get into the actual build now. We're going to start off by talking about equipment. Inside of Total War Warhammer 2, Malus has one unique item, the Warp Sword of Cain. This dark blade grants him a few effects, but the one I thought was most important was that it restores his health while in combat. Sounds suspiciously like the Absorb Health enchantment to me. So that was going to be a priority, but the main thing was finding a sword in Skyrim that looks somewhat like the Warp Sword. The closest I could get was a honed Ancient Nord sword. This is a weapon dropped by higher level Draugr, and it may well be one you've never used before, as its stats suck. High weight and low base damage, but it's the closest looking blade to the Warp Sword, so it's what we're working with. As for armour, we get to go with something more practical. Daedric armour, boots and gauntlets have a similar spike design to Malus's armour in the Warhammer world, and suit the theme of the character pretty well too. An evil individual with a literal demon stuck inside of him does sound like the perfect person to be wearing Daedric armour. On to skills now, and first up in our main skills is one-handed. Malus is a proficient swordsman, able to easily take down most foes he encounters due to his martial prowess. To represent this, we're going to want our one-handed skill to be high, and to invest heavily into the Armsman perk for bonus damage, as well as Fighting Stance, Savage Strike, and Critical Charge in order to regularly use a variety of power attacks. Then we're going to want to go up the right hand side of a smithing tree all the way to Daedric. This will allow us to improve all of our equipment to the highest standard, but more importantly, will help ensure the character can make a full set of Daedric armour as soon as possible. At the very start of the game, you're going to have to throw together whatever heavy armour pieces you come across, but I wanted getting the equipment to be a priority. A basic Ancient Nord sword is a fine early game replacement for the honed variant, but there's no good switch out for armour, so I figured it would be better to prioritise levelling smithing in order to be able to craft the Daedric items, rather than waiting till you're about level 40 and find them in the wild. Last of the main skills is enchanting. Now, the only truly necessary enchantment you need is Absorb Health on your sword. However, I ended up going real heavy on the investment to make the build both stronger and easier to play. I maxed out Enchanter, then got Insightful Enchanter, Corpus Enchanter, and Extra Effect. This will make all of your enchantments as strong as possible and allow twice the effects. The reason I did this is because I wanted to not only have Absorb Health on the sword, but throw in Soul Trap too. This might not be something the Warp Sword necessarily does, but I figured it could pass on a role-playing perspective as the demon Sarkhan consuming the souls of the enemies you slay. With double enchantments, this also means you can go heavy with enchanting your armour. The effects I focused on with armour were Fortify One-Handed, Heavy Armour, and Health. Basically just anything that makes you tougher and stronger. Onto the minor skills of the build now, basically the ones you can just throw the odd extra point into. First is Heavy Armour for fairly obvious reasons. As you don't wear a full suit of armour, most of the perks in the tree are worthless, so instead you should only really focus on investing into Juggernaut in order to raise your overall armour rating. Within the Total War game, Malus has a unique mechanic where he can either let his demon take control, or he can keep it at bay with the use of elixirs. Sounds an awful lot like alchemy to me, so I decided we throw a little alchemy into the mix, but with a bit of a twist. The relationship Malus has with Sarkhan is a dangerous one. Letting it take control or fighting back against it both come with consequences, so I decided the potions Malus uses should also have consequences. So I went and worked out what potions I could craft that would help the character while also hurting them. First potion is Boar Tusk combined with Slaughterfish Egg and Scales. This creates a potion that fortifies block and stamina, but also deals you a little bit of damage. Helpful if you need to quickly bash stagger a foe with your sword, but not without a price to pay. Next potion is Canis Root, Giant's Toe and Hanging Moss. This fortifies health and one-handed damage, but will drain your stamina. This felt a little like Sarkhan taking over, making you stronger for a brief period of time, but also wearing out your mortal form. The idea with alchemy for this character is to only use potions that have both positive and negative effects. This means you'll be wanting to craft your own potions, and you also must not get the purity perk. Even if you max out alchemy, just leave that perk alone and keep on drinking dodgy poison potions. With skills covered, let's go over standing stones, powers and levelling. There's no need for magicka with this character, so you're going with a health stamina split. I'd recommend something around 70-30 or 80-20, with health taking the larger of the two. You're going to need a large health pool to survive, but you definitely don't want to neglect stamina entirely, or else you have no power attacks or time to be sprinting. As for a standing stone, I decided to go with the Steed Stone. This will remove the weight of worn armour and grants a healthy dose of extra carry capacity. Malus is quite the fast fighter and moves at a considerable pace, despite the weight of his equipment, so it felt right to pick this stone. As for powers, I decided to go with the Dismay Shout. This will apply the fear effect on enemies, causing them to flee from you. This comes directly from Total War Warhammer 2, where Malus literally has the fear effect on his character as standard. Turns out being the host to a creature of chaos makes you come across a little spookier than most people. On to factions and followers now, and I'll start with the easier half. No followers. It's bad enough for Malus that he has a demon constantly whispering inside his mind. He doesn't need to keep watch over a companion, lest they stab him in the back. As for the factions Malus will naturally gravitate towards, any of the more evil factions, and any that let him satiate his bloodlust. The main one here would likely be the Dark Brotherhood, as getting paid to kill will help him get by. As it stands though, Malus came to Skyrim for a purpose, and in order to fulfill that purpose, he will need to go along with the main story, at least for a little while. Of course, he's not actually the Dragonborn, but telling the local Nords that it's actually a demon inside of him absorbing the souls of the dragons probably won't go down well. Besides, it's not the first time he's been a false prophet. I'll explain more of why Malus is pretending to be the Dragonborn once we get onto the backstory. Before that happens, I'm just going to quickly go over how the character actually plays. On the most basic level, he's a strong, offensive one-handed warrior who will absolutely wreck against small groups of enemies in close quarters combat. With decent armour, a focus on one-handed power attacks, and the Absorb Health enchantment, the ideal place to be is in a melee. When I first tested this build, I thought it may be a little too overpowered, but then a dragon showed up and I realised that it was perfect. Enemies at range will absolutely wreck you. Your armour may be good, but it's not great, and the main way you regain health is by attacking, so any foes that keep their distance while dealing damage are a nightmare. You'll need to use cover and manage your stamina carefully in order to close the distance on them as best as you can, hopefully resulting in you charging in with a deadly sprinting power attack. You also may well find you struggle a bit with large crowds, something we're all used to I feel, but in this case it's because getting heavily outnumbered means the health you regain is nowhere near enough to outweigh the damage you'll take, and your potions also damage you, so you can't just spam them to get better. If you have a crowd of enemies to deal with, then your best friend will be the Dismay Shout. Try to use the shout to thin out the crowd, and then isolate enemies and take them on one at a time. The thing I really liked about playing this build was that I got a real power fantasy when in a one-on-one battle, but a reality check once the enemies piled up. But I think that's enough talking about how to play the character. It's time to explain how we got here. Malus Darkblade is the tyrant of Hag-Grief. He has power, wealth, and a problem. As he sits upon his throne, the whispers of Sarkhan compel him to commit unspeakable acts of cruelty and debauchery. The acts themselves do not bother Malus. He is indulged in far worse pleasures of his own volition. The problem is that indulging would make the demon stronger. His soul may already be forfeit, but he cannot lose his mind too. It was time to rid himself of a chaotic influence once and for all. He had already travelled across all corners of his home seeking a cure, so he must now head further afield. He must head to the lands of Skyrim. He had heard tales of a magical potion known as the White Phial, hidden away within the snows of Skyrim. The potion had unknown properties and may well work better than the elixirs he was already having to use to keep the whispers at bay. Boarding a black ark, he set sail, leaving his home behind once more in search of a way to rid him of his waking nightmare. The plan quickly goes afoul, however, as the floating fortress suffered great damages on its journey, sinking into the icy waters. As Malus plunged into the freezing water, he knew there was only one way to escape. With that, he closed his eyes and let Sarkhan take control. Whatever the demon did, it kept Malus alive and returned him to dry land. However, it was not without disadvantage, as it seemed he had regained control at a particularly inopportune time. A dozen human soldiers lay slain around him, and a score more had him surrounded. He swore he heard the demon chuckle as he surveyed this, and knew he wouldn't be able to fight his way out without Sarkhan's help. It was a cruel ploy of the demon to gain even more control, but he wasn't about to play his games. Instead, he threw his sword to the ground, dropped to his knees, and placed his hands behind his back, allowing the remaining soldiers to take him prisoner. It seemed he had made his way to Skyrim. Now all he had to do was learn the location of the White Phial and claim it for himself. And escape, of course. But he had a feeling that wouldn't be too much trouble. And there we have the first of my Warhammer crossover builds in Skyrim. If you watched the announcement video for this, then you'll know there's plenty more to come, with the next build 2 weeks away, and a stream on Wednesday. If you thought I did a good job of recreating the character, then leave a like. Leave a dislike if you can't believe how terrible that was. Like, seriously? Daedric Armor and Malus Darkblade? La! Oh, and subscribe too, I guess. Anyway, that's all for now. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.